The guy that really gets into the numbers and knows what the matchups are is our guest now in the Sports Bash, and that's KC Joyner. KC, how are you, sir? How was your Christmas?
Oh, it was fantastic. How about yours?
Not bad at all, thank you. I think my voice is starting to come back. At least you can start to understand some of the words that I'm saying and some of the things I'm barking out. Well, let's get into this Eagles-Cowboys matchup. I know there's some questions of who's going to play and who's not going to play. What are some of the things that jump out to you about this contest?
Yeah, it is going to be if the Cowboys, how many of their starters are playing full games and how many are going to play a partial game. You think they're going to want to get out to a good start and end on that kind of a high note. So if I'm the Eagles, you talk about ball control leading into this. If I'm the Eagles, I'm thinking about trying to do ball control and keep the thing close for at least, the first half. And then if you can do that, and I think the Eagles have the capacity to do that. If the Eagles could keep it close for the first half, and the Dallas starts to rest things, then you start, putting the pedal to the floor in the second half of things. So if I'm the Eagles, I'm really thinking about trying to survive the first few series. Hopefully they kick field goals and things, and if that's the case, the Eagles can come away with the win.
I know that it looks like the Cowboys are going to be without their left tackle, and they're making a change at that position. If there's no Tyron Smith this Sunday, how do the Eagles take advantage of that?
You'd hope that they would do more blitzing and things, but I obviously they don't want to do a lot of blitzing given the issues that they have in their secondary. Plus, if Dallas wants to play that grind them out, that slow-paced game again, that'll get the first half over more quickly. So, and I don't think Dallas, regardless, I know they want to end on a win. I think what they really want to do is make sure that their players are, that they keep their players healthy, and that they just they don't try and lose the edge that they have. So I don't think that necessarily means play to win. That might mean, hey, we'll rush the ball, 20, 25 times even in the first half, and just not, we're not going to put Dak Prescott in a situation where he's got to throw a lot. Because it's such a risky move to even be playing these guys in the first place. I think Dallas just needs to, I wouldn't be surprised if they kept him out there just a couple of series, and so we got to get him out of here. Because the last thing you'd want to see is, an injury like the Patriots had a few years ago was, I think, Edelman got hurt like right before the playoffs, and or Welker got hurt right before the playoffs, and you just can't have that kind of injury. So they just need to back off and don't get another Tyron Smith injury happen, and just play a couple of series and get out of there.
Vertically challenged receiver. I knew where you were going there. We also saw, the good receivers, just not the tallest guys in the world. We saw the Cowboys defense, Casey. They've kind of adjusted the second half of the season, switching from a 4-3 base to a 3-2 nickel scheme. It certainly looked like on Monday Night Football, the Lions never figured it out. Can the Eagles do a better job of evolving with the Cowboys' mid-game adjustments?
I think that the Eagles can say, if you want to run a nickel all game long, remember the Eagles have ranked in the top 5 most of the season in my good blocking rate metric that measures how often an offense gives its ball carriers quality run blocking. It's an important metric because good blocking carriers are 5 times as valuable as bad blocking carriers. So I think what the Eagles need to do is say, if you're going to sit back in that nickel, we've got the offensive line to go ahead and run against you guys. We've got the blockers up front. They did a fantastic job against Baltimore just a couple weeks ago, and Baltimore's got a fantastic rush defense. So if I'm Philadelphia, I'm saying if you guys want to go back to play that kind of defense and expect us to throw the football, we're not going to do it. Because Wentz threw 6 vertical passes last week, his season low. I mean, the Eagles are just leaning on their ground game, and it's probably a wise move to make. So I think this is going to be an old school game, and that you're going to see a ton of running plays in the first half.
Casey, I know you're the perfect guy to ask this to. I have 2 questions for you. The second one feeds off the first. So let's start with this. The wide receivers for the Eagles, metrically speaking, how poor have they been this season?
It depends on which metric you want to go, but you can pretty much pick the metric. They're not, I always, people talk about their drop rates and things. I never worry too much about drop rates because when you start looking at drop rates, a lot of drop rates have to do with luck and it has to do with other elements. But they don't get open vertically. Their vertical numbers are bad. Their reception rates are solid, but their air yards downfield are poor. But I think a lot of it is that the Eagles realize we don't have the kind of team that can go vertical, and I just wonder. I know they don't have a great set of receivers, but when you're asking your quarterback to throw only less than 10 vertical attempts every game, and that's about what's happening, I mean, you're basically making them look like what Alex Smith was a couple years ago at Kansas City, or even what he is right now, where Alex Smith doesn't go downfield at all. So it's an issue of they might have better receivers than their numbers show, but if you've decided as an offense that we're just not going to throw vertical, your receivers are never going to post quality vertical numbers.
So then the second question to feed off of that goes that your colleague there at ESPN, Adam Schefter, is saying that, quote, every element is in place for Desean Jackson to potentially return to Philadelphia. What would he do to this offense, just his presence?
if he plays now, 2 years ago he was a phenomenal vertical pass receiver. Last year, last year he was a phenomenal vertical receiver. This year, not so much. When you look at Kirk Cousins' numbers on vertical passes, what was it? I did a study a couple weeks ago that Jackson was third on the team among high-volume vertical receivers in yards per attempt. So in other words, if you're measuring yards per attempt on the guys who get a good number of targets, he was only third in the team, and in 2015 he was easily first. So it says something for Cousins and his ability to start spreading the ball around, but it also says that maybe Jackson over the course of the year hasn't been quite what he was in the last year. But the thing is he is a guy who I think can give you the short-term bridge to say, this is where we're going to go from an offense now, or kind of passing game we're going to have, because I don't think you're not going to make him a vertical threat for a long period of time. But you say we get him here, he becomes a vertical threat for a couple of years until we can develop somebody else who can take over that role, or even a couple of receivers who can share that role. That's what he can do for you, because he was averaging 19 yards per attempt a couple of years ago, and this past year I think it's 15 yards per attempt. And even if he gets at that level, the other Eagles receivers are nowhere near that level. They're barely in the double-digit range for the most part. So he would give them a significant edge on those passes.
KC Joyner with us at KC Joyner TFS on Twitter. He's the ESPN Senior NFL and Fantasy Football Insider. Also has some WWE coverage as well. We'll get to that a little bit later on in the interview. But KC, how about the job that Doug Pederson has done with Carson Wentz this season? You're talking about Carson Wentz, a guy who went from an FCS national champion to a 16-game NFL season. He only had 5 days really to be surprised. You're the starter. Here we go.
Yeah, it's that kind of a situation. I was just thinking about this over the last couple of days. You think about the Eagles situation. I actually think about the Browns situation. You think the Browns right now are saying to themselves, boy, we wish we had Carson Wentz under center versus the guys they have right now? I mean, yeah, it's too early to tell, because maybe Robert Griffin III becomes healthy and he stays healthy. But the way it's looking right now, it's like the Eagles look like they got a steal, because even if Wentz is not right now playing the way he was earlier this season, he showed the kind of quarterback he could be earlier in this season. Okay, this is his ceiling, and you see that ceiling and go, okay, that's a quarterback who's got top 10 potential. We've seen him play at that level. So, yeah, he's not doing so now, but let's get him some better talent. He can get up there. And I'm starting to look at that compared to a lot of other teams, and you go, okay, we start looking at some other clubs and go, where are they at quarterback-wise? And I'm starting to go, the Eagles, at least right now, might even be mid-tier of the league as far as their quarterback situation. Because, I mean, you start looking at Denver. Are they happy with Simeon? Maybe, maybe not. Jackson and Bortles, they're not happy with where they're at. Cleveland, they're not happy with where they're at. The Bills, they're giving up on their quarterback, it looks like. The Jets, I mean, you can get 10, 12 teams who are in a worse quarterback situation right down to the Eagles, and the Eagles have a less than stellar situation around Wentz. So I still think where the Eagles are at quarterback-wise, they got to be patting themselves on the back for the pull off this offseason.
Since we're in Jersey, I was waiting for you to mention Houston and Tom Savage.
The list is long, yeah, and yeah. Again, look at what Houston paid for. I mean, they paid to get Osweiler, and Osweiler was just as bad this year as he was last year. And now they've got Savage under center. I mean, if you're looking at the Eagles, this is Wentz has taken a step back, but he's a rookie. Like you said, he got into the situation very quickly. Doesn't have a lot of great receivers around him, and there's some negative situations, and yet I don't think you ever look at him on the field and go, like, there are times when you look at Jared Goff this year and you went, the Rams obviously didn't even want to put him out there, and you didn't look at Wentz and say, well, that's a guy we really don't ever want out there. It's like, he's having some struggles, but you can see this guy is still, he's tough, he's smart. You know that, you can see growth going here. It's like, this is his first year, so you can put it in your mind's eye and project it a few years forward to go, this guy's going to be a really good NFL quarterback. And just a lot of teams right now can't say that. And by the way, the draft, Trubisky might be the only quarterback. Now, North Carolina's quarterback might be the only quarterback who can make an impact fairly quickly in the league. I think every other quarterback they have out there in this year's draft is going to be a project. So, again, kudos to the Eagles.
Trubisky, you heard it here first, Casey. So let's talk about a few defensive guys. KC Joyner we're talking with right now. In your mind, who's been more important to the Eagles' defense this season? Malcolm Jenkins, Fletcher Cox, or Jordan Hicks?
I'd say Jenkins, because you've got what Al Davis used to say. When you build a team, you do either go cornerbacks or offensive linemen. He and John Madden used to go back and forth as to what was the most important. And they always thought. I think Madden thought the offensive line was the most important, cornerbacks were second, and Davis thought the other way around. But close next after those situations, they wanted safeties. They wanted guys who could cover. Because you go back and look at the Raiders back in the day, they used to always have top-notch safety players, both who could cover and who could hit. And the the way that the Eagles secondary has played this year, and again, McKelvin's taken a step back. Mills has been terrible this year. Carroll's been very hit or miss. When you look at those guys, they need a lot of help over the top. And you look at the Eagles secondary, I just thinking about it, if Jenkins wasn't there, manning center field and doing the things he's doing, if he wasn't there, or if he was making a lot of mistakes, a lot of errors in coverage like the Eagles have done in the past, how bad would this secondary be? So I think that he's the most important in the sense that he's keeping a lot of big plays from happening, that would have happened, I think, if you put an average safety out there.
KC Joyner joining us here on 97.3 ESPN, the Sports Bash. And KC, Doug Pederson, about to do his 16th head coaching game. What do we know of? I mean, he's undoubtedly been a guy who's not afraid to go for two, not afraid to go for it on fourth down. What do we know about him, metrically speaking, as a head coach that we didn't know, say, 15 weeks ago?
I think from a metric standpoint, is this offense? Well, the thing is, you can pull out of whatever metrics you want, but I'm looking at this offense. I'm still wondering what kind of team he wants this offense to be. What does he want to do? Does he want to be a power running game? Because if he'd like to do that, there are 4 running backs in this year's draft who could be impact players. So you could say, I'm not saying they're going to be Ezekiel Elliott, but I mean, you're talking McCaffrey, you're talking Fournette, you're talking Foreman, and you're talking Dalvin Cook. All 4 of those guys could be immediate impact players. So if you want to run a power running game, maybe you see a Fournette, you can find a way to get to Fournette. Now you've got a power running game. So if he wants to do that, but you also say, okay, does he want to do a dink and dunk passing game? Does he want to do a really safe passing game? You could see him doing that, but he needs, needs players to do it. And then you talk about getting the vertical game. And you see what he's been doing on offense this year. I just don't know that, he's established what type of offense he wants. So you can look metrically and say, metrically, we know that he can coach a team that can get a lot of good run blocking. That's not an insignificant metric, because it's one of the reasons that Tennessee Titans started contending for the playoffs this year, because they turned their offensive line around. And so you can look at that and say that's something he can base his offense around. But I'm curious to see, we know what your line can do. Now what's the rest of your offense want to do? So I'm curious to see where he's going to want to go in the offseason, because that might give us a clue as to what type of team they want to be in the future.
Yeah, you bring up great points about the kind of offense. You're right. We don't know yet what he wants to do with that. Lane Johnson's return last week. He was gone. He was here, and they were winning games early on. He comes back. They beat the Giants. What do you make of Lane Johnson and how valuable he is to this offensive line?
He's a great power blocker. So he could even upgrade the blocking above to where it is right now. But I think what it is that you want to be able to sit somebody out there, tackle, who you can say, okay, you can take this guy and you can go in a block. If you get a block in a one-on-one situation, you can block in a one-on-one situation. We can trust you. The thing is, you can go between. If you've got a terrible run block, if you got a terrible blocker on the end, if you look at like a great blocker, a middle tier blocker, and a terrible blocker on the end, the difference might be that the great blocker allows 0 sacks, and mid tier blocker allows maybe 4 or 5 sacks, and the bad one allows 9 to 10 sacks and things. So I think the difference with Johnson out there might only be 4 or 5 sacks, and in an equivalent number of hurries, or at least equivalent number compared to what you usually give up at that edge, which doesn't sound like much, but if you consider that most sacks kill drives, and you go, okay, well, if he prevents, say, 5 sacks from happening over the year, okay, a sack kills a drive. You usually get 10, 12 drives a game, so he's saving half a game's worth of drives. It's like, okay, having him out there, you look at it from that perspective, it might equal 1 win, and it makes a big difference to have him out there versus somebody else. It might be 1, maybe 2 wins, depending on when the sacks happen, to have that type of player out there. So I think it's a huge upgrade.
KC Joyner with us, covers the entire NFL, not just the Eagles, which we get his perspective on the Eagles each week, but usually we like to wrap up, KC, by asking you some league-type questions. We'll start with the NFC East and the Giants playing the Redskins on Sunday. The Redskins need to win to get into the playoffs. The Giants are saying they will play their starters. They've scored less than 300 points, the New York Football Giants have. How important is it for them to get their offense on track?
Yeah, it doesn't match their talent level, because Perkins is a good running back. I think they can lean on him more, if not the rest of this season, in the future, and things. I think he's going to upgrade their running game. When you've got Shepard and you've got Beckham and you're not putting up that many points, I think it says something for your team, because with that type of defense that they have, if you could get the type of offensive production that you should be able to get talent-wise, you could be able to, win. You could be able to. I mean, that would be a heck of a combination. The thing that they've got going into this game, though, is if they decide they want to play their starters, they need to stop Washington's vertical game, because Washington, if the Giants don't play their starter, will be able to get their vertical game going. And the way the Giants' offense is playing, that'd be a big plus for Washington.
The Bills versus the Jets, maybe not a real sexy matchup, but of course Buffalo, after firing Rex Ryan, they're starting E.J. Manuel this week instead of Tyrod Taylor, who for 2 straight seasons has only 6 interceptions. What's the value in doing that move?
They're doing it to save themselves the money and things, but what I'd like to see is, can Manuel keep Sammy Watkins playing like he did last week? Because Sammy Watkins played fantastic last week, and just think of the Bills, what they've done this year. Imagine if they would have had Sammy Watkins all year playing like he did last year. That would be a playoff team. So if I'm E.J. Manuel, if I'm the Bills, I want to see, Manuel, do you have some kind of rapport with Watkins? Because if you do, maybe we're going to give you a good shot for next year. But if otherwise, the Bills need to do something to upgrade their quarterback core. Because if Manuel can't hit up with Watkins in this matchup under these circumstances, you think, okay, when can you?
I'll bring up a name that fans in our area may remember from his college football days. The Raiders travel to Denver to play the Broncos, and it's going to be the first start for Matt McGloin out of Penn State. So what can we expect from the Raiders offense with McGloin at the helm?
Well, they've got the makings of a really good running attack, and they've got, everybody knows Cooper, but Crabtree's probably actually been the better receiver this year for the Raiders. So I expect that they're going to let McGloin still do a lot of what they were letting Carr do. I think they're going to still be aggressive in offense and such. He's a big step back, but I don't think he's, let me put it this way, some teams, when they go back to their backup, you start to think, okay, well, they can't win this game with that player, or, they're really hoping they get maybe a replacement level. I think you can actually get more than replacement level. I think you can actually take a step up from it. I'm not saying he's going to be a top 10 quarterback, but I wouldn't be surprised to see the Raiders be able to win that game and be able to be very competitive during the playoffs with him under center, because I don't think he's I think he's a step back, but I don't think he's as big a drop-off as a lot of teams that have gone to their backup.
The Falcons are expected to be dangerous in the playoffs. They play the Saints this Sunday. What are you looking for from an Atlanta team in the NFC playoffs?
Atlanta's got a big problem in that they get into too many shootouts. If you go through NFL history and you look at teams that scored over 500 points in a season, which you're talking the greatest offenses of all time, if they get into a shootout game, which is where defined as when each team scores 24 or more points, those teams are barely over 500. Atlanta's got a situation where both this game here against the Saints and during the playoffs, they're going to run into situations where they're going to be getting into shootouts. And if you said, okay, well, they've got to win, say, three games in the playoffs, maybe 4, depending on how this weekend goes. If you get to win 3 or 4 games in a row with potential shootouts, the odds that you do that, if you're at 50-50 with one shootout, the odds that you do that are pretty bad. So I think Atlanta's going to make some noise, but I think that defense is going to catch up to them.
Speaking of the Falcons, who's your NFL MVP? Matt Ryan, Matt Stafford, Aaron Rodgers, Ezekiel Elliott, or someone I didn't name?
Tom Brady. Tom Brady for what he's done coming back, to miss 4 games, to not have Gronk, to have the receiving core that they have, which is not very good, and he doesn't miss a beat. I mean, his numbers, he's near the top of the league in vertical passing. In vertical passing, he doesn't have Gronk. Chris Hogan, he's got nobody. He's got, Edelman. I mean, there's nobody on that team who should be catching vertical passes. And here's Brady, at or near the top of the league in vertical yards per attempt since week 4. I mean, it's insane that he can play at that level.
Hogan. Okay, so finally on Sunday Night Football, the Lions and the Packers. Sorry, I had to get my Hogan's Heroes reference in there. Lions and the Packers winner clinches the NFC. I watched so much Hogan's Heroes, Casey, I used to be able to tell you if it was the old Kinch or new Kinch based on the color of the sign, but that's a whole nother subject matter. So I will ask you about Sunday Night Football, Lions-Packers. The winner gets the NFC North, or they might be able to both make the playoffs with a tie. Can the Lions bounce back after the tough loss to the Cowboys, or will the Packers keep that winning streak going?
This is going to be another one of those shootout games. The problem for Detroit is I don't think that their running game is as good as what Green Bay's is. And Green Bay's got Montgomery, who's turned out to be a really good running back. Not an elite running back, but okay, we can win games with this guy in our backfield. I don't know Detroit has that kind of home run breaking skills. And not only that, Detroit's best receiver is probably Golden Tate right now. And if you compare what he's been doing with what Jordy Nelson's been doing, if I'm looking at it going, okay, which one of those players is more likely to put up a dominant game, I'm thinking Nelson by a pretty wide margin. And the other Packers receivers are probably all, if you tier the Packers receivers versus the Lions receivers, the Packers receivers are all probably about a half step better, or half step up metrically better than the Lions receivers. So I think it's a shootout game, and I think Green Bay's just got more weapons.